So, welcome. Andrea will be presenting on 8 reading strategies that will work for any whole class novel. Andrea has over 16 years of experience teaching French and Spanish. She believes in the transformative power of reading and storytelling, and that connecting with the students and bring a book to life can really be a game changer. She's a world languages coordinator for a large urban school district where she has the privilege of mentoring teachers in sustainable high leverage practices that build proficiency. And she's here to help you guys help your students build proficiency as well. And on that note, I will pass it over to you, Andrea. Let me make sure you have the ability to share your screen. Stop sharing mine.
It doesn't, I have an error message.
Try again.
Oh,
I made you
okay.
co-host. It should let you.
Let's see. Well, I still just have an error message for that.
You said error message twice. That makes me appear.
Oh.
Tech support has entered the chat.
What error are you getting?
I get a blue triangle that says desktop 1 with the exclamation point in the middle.
And if you click on that, does it?
It does not allow me, well, let me see. Might be a system settings thing. Okay. Let me see if this fixes it. Okay. I think it could be the privacy settings on my school's computer, but now I think I'm able to. So let's see here. Okay. All right, there we go.
And tech support is
Sorry
leaving the chat.
All right.
Thank you, Chris.
Okay, so sorry for that little delay there, but let's get started. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm really excited to share these strategies with you. As Marie said, I was a classroom teacher for a really long time, and now I'm a world language coordinator for a big district, which means I get to be in a lot of people's classrooms seeing a lot of high leverage strategies. And tonight, one of the things that I want to make sure you all walk away with is at least one, hopefully a lot more than one, but at least one new to you strategy. I know there's a lot of sharing. A lot of you attend many conferences and webinars. And so I wanted to try and, hopefully you take something new away from here. But the other thing that's really important to me is that world language teachers have a lot of preps. So I want these strategies that I'm sharing tonight to be something that you can use in level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. You can use it across multiple languages. You can use it across any kind of text because when I was a French teacher, I had 4 preps at a time. And so I needed to be able to do for my sanity the same thing in every level. So this is my take on it. We're going to look at pre-reading strategies, activities to use while you're in the middle of reading the novel, and then finally some meaningful ways to wrap up your novel study. So let's start out. I'm going to use my own novel as the example in this, but I promise these are really flexible strategies. You can use them with any novel that you're teaching in class. So this is my novel, Les Zombies Attaquent Québec. And we're going to look at some pre-reading strategies first. So the first one is that I like to call it uncovering the details. So you would show the cover to your students, take a picture of it. Don't give them the books yet. Don't make it special when they finally get their hands on those copies of the book. So show the cover, give them a minute to really observe, really think about what they see. A lot of times our kids are not really practiced in just sitting with an image for a long time. They go to a museum, they zip through the whole gallery. Make them really sit and look. And then we're going to cover it and we're going to put it away. So, oh, is it going to let me? Okay, so now I've covered it. You saw it for a minute there, but it's gone. And then depending on the level, I might ask different questions. You know, if it's level 1s, I'm going to ask either or true false questions. Level 2s, they might get some open-ended questions that I'm looking for a one-word answer. Some of the things that I might ask are things like, what season was it? What color was the girl's coat? Was she wearing sneakers or boots? Was she holding a stick or a shovel? Were there fewer or more than 7 trees in the photo? What color is the title written in? If it's a higher level class who are capable of a little more output, I might give them in teams a few minutes to just generate all of the details rather than asking the questions, and then have like a category style reveal where like, you know, if everybody said the title's written in orange, you know, we cross that one off and we only give points for unique answers. But I just like to generate a little bit of excitement before we actually open the book. The next thing is, and this is really pretty basic, but sometimes we don't stop to anchor our story in time and space. And so my story takes place in Quebec. I would absolutely do a map talk. I think anytime that we're reading a novel that takes place in another country, it's really important to start with some geography. Where in the world are we? And what does the geography of this place, how does that shape the way people live their lives? It might shape the kinds of foods they eat, the kinds of hobbies they do. Are they close to mountains? Are they close to water? It can shape a lot of things. You know, who are your neighbors? Do your neighbors speak the same languages as you, different languages as you, from you? If it takes place in the US, a map talk may be less compelling, but I know a lot of people also read stories that take place in different historical time periods. And I think it's really useful for kids to see what was happening in the US at that time, what was happening in other countries at that time, just to sort of build those connections. Sometimes we're reading science fiction stories where there's some world building happening and we need to maybe just anchor the story in like, what is different about this world? Like, what are the rules of this new universe that we might need to like be thinking about, and what are the implications for that? So basic stuff, but I think it's important. Last, for pre-reading, I really love to start with predictions using the table of contents. One of the reasons for this is because it's a really great way to get in repetitions of either simple future or regular future tense. And it's kind of, you know, I would show them the list of chapter titles from the table of contents. I would give students a list of characters, and then I would give them a sentence frame. So in this one, you know, the subject is going to do something. That would be a pretty simple, like approachable for some lower levels. You could always make your sentence frames more sophisticated for older levels, but have students in pairs or in trios generate what do they think is going to happen based on the chapter titles. And then I like to keep that up on a big poster, some chart paper in our room. And as we read each chapter, we, you know, either cross off or star any ones that actually happened. And sometimes, you know, I give them a prize if their prediction came true, like maybe they're class DJ for the day and they get to pick out our walk in and walk out song or something like that. But it's a really easy way to get some reps of future tense and just start to generate excitement about what might happen. And making predictions is a skill that we, you know, it's a good like critical literacy skill that we want to develop in them. And this is an easy way to do that. So now we're going to dive into activities that you might do when you are in the novel, throughout the novel. And for these, you can really use them with any chapter of any novel, but I think a lot of times a chapter will jump out at you that like, oh, this activity would be really good for chapter 6 or chapter 4. So just kind of keep that in mind, but they're flexible. So my first one for you is an emoji analysis. And basically, all I'm doing here is I'm giving students a chunk of text. It could be, depending on the level, depending on the novel, it could be a paragraph, it could be a half a page, it could be a page. But I would have students, I give them a chunk of text, and I would have them identify what the most likely emotion that a particular character is feeling could be. And I would project a chart like this where there's numbers, emojis, and words, because that gives people, first of all, it gives me an opportunity once they've kind of decided what emotion it is. The whole class can hold up a finger to show me like, I think it's number 4, I think it's number 8. So I can get a quick read on the whole class. But then I can call out a couple of individuals to say, what emotion do you think Charlotte is feeling in this passage? And they can tell me, you know, elle est fâchée, elle est triste. Or if they're really shy or not ready for even that much output, maybe they just show me the number of fingers that represents that emotion. I do this activity for a couple of reasons. First of all, it lets me know if they understood the passage. If, you know, somebody's pet passed away and they say that they're super happy, I know they didn't understand the passage. So it gives me a quick glimpse into their comprehension. It's a sneaky way to make them reread because they can't just tell me the emotion. They have to cite some text evidence that shows why that character would be experiencing that emotion. And sometimes it's going to be straightforward and it might be right there in the text. But a lot of times it's going to have to require some inference making, which is a higher order thinking skill that they need to be able to practice. So, you know, finally, building empathy. So one of the biggest advantages of reading reading fiction texts with our students is that it puts you literally in the shoes, in the mind of another character. And it's really, there's a lot of studies out there that have shown that one of the best ways to build empathy in kids is to read fiction. And so going a little bit deeper with that and asking, how is this character feeling, is a great social emotional building tool, as well as just like reading comprehension. So in my chapter, in my book, it's in French, but I put it in English because, you know, I imagine not everybody in this audience speaks French. So we have Mrs. Simard stops in front of Felix and Nathan's table. Suddenly, she bites Felix on the shoulder. Felix screams and Nathan jumps out of his chair. She bites again, this time on Felix's neck. Felix passes out on his table. So then, after we read that, and, you know, I may just have, like, if the kids were doing it for a whole chapter, I might just have, like, you know, next to every paragraph, maybe you have a note catcher and you draw your emoji, or it could be on the screen like this. Hopefully, you are choosing number 4. There's some surprise. Your teacher just walked into the room and starts biting a student. It's because she's a zombie. So that's just an example, but you can do this with any text. The next one, this one's complicated, but when you look at the slides later, there's a template here that I'll show you that goes through, it will walk you through every step. But basically, we're going to take a chapter or sometimes 2 chapters. In this example, it's 2 chapters of a novel. So I picked chapters 4 and 5 of my novel. And on the left-hand side here, you can see I assigned each student 1 sentence in the text. If you want, you could have pairs, you could have trios. I was teaching in a school with fairly small classes, so I could do 1 student, but it works just as well with big groups. You give this student 1 sentence from the text, and I cut it out on slips of paper. This is your sentence. It is a secret. Nobody can know what your sentence is. And then on this frame, this one in the middle, they're going to draw their sentence. They're not going to use any words, only images. Stick figures are fine, but no words. And then I collect all the images. I would give them a time limit because we have some perfectionists, we have some people who are really talented artists. I would give them 5 minutes max to make this drawing because the quality of the art really isn't, you know, the instructional goal here. So I collect all of them. And then up here in the corner where it has an image number, so I'm going to shuffle them all because I don't want them to be in chronological order. I'm going to write an image number on each one. So image 1, image 2, image 3. And then the next day in class, they're going to come in. All of these images are going to be hung up around our classroom, or you can use the hallway if your school allows you to do that. And I'm going to give students an answer sheet that's blank. This is the answer sheet over here. So it's numbered 1 through 15. And they are going to go and they're going to look at one of the images. They don't all have to start at the same image. Otherwise, you'll have like a big traffic jam. It doesn't matter where they start. But wherever they start, let's say I start at image number 6, I have to write the sentence in the text that I think is represented by that picture on line number 6. So this is more sneaky rereading. We know kids need tons of repetitions. And in order to really figure out which sentence my classmate drew, my classmate who picked image or who has image number 3, gosh, I see a picture of some kids running away from some zombies and there's a school in the background and, you know, they're going to pick out their sentence and they're going to write it on here. The other great advantage of this, you can just sit there and not talk. You can sip your coffee. It takes them a long time because they have to reread the chapter with each new image kind of. I mean, maybe not the whole chapter, but they know approximately where it is and they're really narrowing in on these sentences. And one thing we know about CI mini novels is that they're really repetitive. So it also forces them to do some careful analysis and choose between two sentences that might be fairly similar. So then when they have their answer sheet completely filled out, they visited each picture in our gallery, they have reread and reread and reread this book, and hopefully their answer sheet looks kind of like this sheet on the left that had all of the original sentences, but it will be in a different order because we shuffled them to make it harder for them. Then I lead a class conversation. And my class conversation is going to be like, you know, we go to image number 1. I hold up the image for the class. I compliment them on their amazing art, or maybe we laugh, like if it's, you know, some, depending on the culture of your class and the community you've built, if that is something that won't hurt anybody's feelings, if you can do some gentle teasing around like, well, this is so interesting, you know, but, and it also is a way to highlight our really artistic students' talents too. So we talk about the image and we ask people, what do you think? Which sentence did you call out? So they're reading the sentence directly from their answer sheet that they think represented this image. And the student artist is going to tell us, yes, that's it. No, it's not it. And we go through and we do the next one and the next one. And then I save the really good images to use like, sometimes, you know, it's also okay if you have more than one kid, like if you have trios, you could either have them work together on one image, or you could have 3 kids do the same sentence and you group them together. And here's you know, image number 3, there's 3A, 3B, and 3C. They all represent the same sentence, but I have 3 chances to see whose art really helped me to understand, identify what sentence in the text we're talking about. The real purpose though is that sneaky rereading. There's really detailed directions in the template. If you access the slides later and you want, like, it will walk you through all of it. Because I know that one involves a little more explaining, but it is a crowd pleaser. Kids really like it because they're up and on their feet. I really like it because I can rest my voice. And I can just, I don't know, it's one of my favorites. Okay, so the next one is 9 Square Bingo. I think the first person I ever saw using this was Donna Tatum John, so I want to give her credit for that. I don't know where she got it from, but it is basically just a bingo game. But what we're going to do, one of the things that's great about this is it requires almost zero prep from you because all you have to do is provide a list of words from the chapter. Those words are going to become the words that kids write on their bingo board. So they're just going to draw their own 9 square on a piece of paper. You're not going to make photocopies. You don't have time for that. And I would give them more than 9 words to choose from. Ideally, maybe you have like 15 words, they're picking 9. For me, I think the words that are easiest to choose are character names and places and objects. Like it's just, for me, it's easier to generate questions. That part comes in later. If the bingo words are nouns. So they all draw their 9 square board. They write at random, whatever words they choose. You don't want them to all have the same board. So you tell them you're going to pick 9 terms from my list and you're going to write 1 term in every square of your bingo board. And then I am going to generate questions. I generate them on the fly. I don't prep them in advance, but you could prep them in advance if you needed to, that can be answered by one of these terms. And then as you ask the questions, they cross off their squares. So for example, this might be this would be from chapter 1 of my book. These would be the terms that maybe I would maybe generate a list that was, like I said, 15 terms. One of my students maybe picked these 9 terms. This is where they put them. And so my questions, it's just another way to do comprehension, but it's gamified and they're happier. So it might be something like, Who did the teacher bite? And then, they're like, oh, it was Felix, and they cross Felix off. Or, you know, it could be what person, she doesn't show up in this picture, but what person's enemy, what it was, is Livia in the text. And then they'd be like, oh, it's Charlotte. Or where do the students go when they leave the classroom? Oh, le bus scolaire. You're just asking lots and lots of questions, and they can be super repetitive, but until we get all of the terms and somebody has a bingo. If somebody gets a bingo really fast, I just say, oh, actually, we're playing blackout bingo. You need to get all 9 squares, or you need to get 2 bingos, or, look at the clock, see how much time you have, but you can extend it as you need. But it's really easy because it doesn't require any prep from you. And then if you have extra time and you want them to, like, they've heard you doing a lot of questions, you could have, like, as an exit slip that they give you, they write 3 questions that could be used with their 9 square bingo board. If you just need a little extra something. Okay, so now we're going to move into some post-reading strategies that are also really flexible with any text. And post-reading, sometimes I feel like we finally get through the book and we've been maybe working on it a long time, because sometimes, maybe you're going at a good clip and you're doing like a chapter a day, but sometimes we've been sitting with this novel for a while. And I think there is this tendency sometimes to just like, close that book, put it back in the cupboard till next year. But I actually think it's pretty important and meaningful to wrap up your novel study in a way that really allows students the opportunity to show what they've learned, and not just like the end, we're done. So one of my favorites is to do a time capsule. This one is a more creative one. And it's pretty open-ended. So if that freaks you out, this might not be for you, although I do give a lot of scaffolding and directions. But the basic idea is that we're going to, we're putting this book literally away in the closet till next year's class takes it out and starts. So with that box of books, our class set of books, I want there to be a time capsule left by the class before. And it's a fun tradition because a lot of times they know kids in the grade above them, or they have siblings. And it's kind of fun when they get to see like, oh, that's Joe's work, he made that. So the kids create a time capsule. Every student is responsible for making an artifact, and every artifact has to have like a museum style label that explains what this item is and why it's in there. Those labels I'm going to differentiate based on the proficiency level of my students. If it is my level 1 kids, it's going to be a little bullet point. It's going to be a little like one sentence, like, this is a picture that Bob took, what have you. Some of the things that my kid, I originally, when I started doing this project, I was like, you can do anything. And then over time, I kind of honed it into like what worked best. We had a lot of receipts and ticket stubs I got submitted one year, and there weren't actually some of them were actually like, oh, these characters went to this restaurant in the book and I made a receipt of their, of what they paid for their food, and it shows what they all ate. And that's great. Not all novels are going to lend themselves to something that has that direct of a tie. And so I also opened it up to be like, imagine, you get this glimpse into your characters' lives via the words on the page, but you know enough about them that you could maybe imagine, where would the 2 main characters want to go for lunch, and what would that receipt look like? So they're doing a little bit more creating, but they need to be able to justify that they understood that the novel has to serve as the springboard for this artifact. It has to come from like, I know these characteristics about these people in the story, therefore they would be likely to do XYZ. So ticket stubs and receipts were popular, I think, because it's just paper and pencil, and some kids don't. I like to have some options for kids that don't want to like go crazy. I got a lot of like chat transcripts where they would like, make a picture that looked like their text messages. That would be a conversation two characters would have had, like maybe they're frustrated at a third character and they're expressing their frustration. I got a lot of clay sculptures, a lot of Play-Doh. I got framed photos, and sometimes it would be like kids would, I don't know if you've ever played the game Freeze Frame, but it's where you give a scene to a group of students while they're reading the novel, and they have to like create the scene, and then they like lie on the floor and like, or sometimes they're standing up, and you like take a photo of them doing that scene. It's like a gallery walk, but it's like with their bodies and not an image that you drew. Anyway, sometimes I would get kids would recreate a scene, and then they would take a photo and they'd print out the photo and put it in a little frame. Sometimes I've had kids make an object that figured prominently in the story, and they just, sometimes it's out of cardboard. It could be like a menu. It could be like a party invitation if there was any sort of like big event in the novel, but they make this time capsule. Every kid contributes something. And I gave some scaffolded sentence stems with, to talk so that they could explain what their item was and why it was important. But then we put these all in a shoebox, and then they go with the books in my closet at school. And then when it's time to open the time capsule the next year, I worked at a small school, and this was like a doable thing, but if this part isn't, you could always film it or something. But I invited my kids from last year to pop in, and we would open the time capsule like the last 5 minutes of one class period. And so I gave them permission to come in because they thought it was really fun to like see the other kids open the time capsule. But you don't get to open it till the next class has finished the book, because you don't want to give away any spoilers. So that was a fun thing that we used to do every year. And then my other one is a character awards ceremony. And so we've been working with these people in our stories for a long time. And so what I would do would be to create some big categories, like big bucket categories. And these categories were, like some examples are who would make the best boss, who would be the best spy, who would be the most resourceful in a natural disaster, who would be the most likely to start a revolution. And then I put those on, like each one on a single piece of chart paper. So category 1, who would make the best boss, one piece of chart paper. Category 2, who would make the best spy, one piece of chart paper. So then the students go around the room, and they have their novel in front of them, and they are gonna, again, have to reread. They are going to find some evidence in the text that talks about why they're nominating a particular character. So they go around to the chart paper and they write somebody's name. So it might be Rosalie is a character in my book. They would maybe write her name under would be the most resourceful in a natural disaster. And by the way, these categories ideally have nothing to do with actually what's in your book, because the goal is that they're really analyzing the information that they have about these characters and trying to like put it into a totally different context. And how would these same characters, using the information we know about them after reading 12 chapters about them, how would they react in a really different context? And so what they're going to do, they're going to nominate a character, and they're going to cite evidence from the text. So they don't actually have to like produce anything necessarily. If you had upper level students, you could certainly have them write like, because blah, 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 blah. But for level 1 kids, they can literally copy a sentence directly from the novel that supports their nomination. I think Rosalie would be the most resourceful in a natural disaster because she was always looking for food. She was always like trying to figure out when the next, or she's really good at maps or whatever makes sense. But you're going to find something in the text, and then you nominate all the characters. And then I like to have an actual award ceremony, make a little podium with some boxes, and we have some kids pretend to be those characters and accept the award. If you want to go crazy, you can have them, there can be an award speech. That's like a whole other level. But it really does make them do some rereading, visit parts of the book that maybe are a little far, several weeks back. which I just think is valuable to get that summary. The other thing is, if you don't like the idea of, best boss, best buy, like a totally different context, you can keep it really simple and just use adjectives. Which character is the most artistic? Which character is the most compassionate? Which character is the most selfish? And they just cite their evidence like that. As an aside, I used to do this activity with my novel, but then at the end of the year, I also did it with my students. So I would do it via Google form so that they couldn't see each other's nominations. So they would nominate a classmate for, who is the kindest, who is the most helpful, who is the funniest, who is the best artist in the class, and kids would vote. And I would, because it's a Google form and I'm the one who has all the answers, some kids get nominated for a lot of things, but I would massage the results so that make sure every single kid in the class was getting an award. And then we would have some little certificates and a little donut party or something. But I originally only did it with my novels, and then I started doing it with, the actual kids in my class, and it was a really big hit. I think sometimes we forget how powerful it is when we tell kids what they're great at. So I always like to find other opportunities to do that. And then I have one more. I actually took it out of my slides because I didn't think I was going to have time. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about it because I do have time. Maybe I'm speaking really fast. The last one that I always really like to do, and forgive me because there are no slides for it, but I will just tell you about it, that you're maybe familiar with, is a shrinking summary. So for a shrinking summary, students are going to write a summary of the text. I like to use a numbered word sheet where they write one word on every line, and you have 5 lines, like 5 words per line, so that you can really quickly see how many words they wrote. I'll link a document that has one of those sheets in there. The reason I like to do that is because I need to give them a baseline for how many words they're going to write for their original summary. So maybe I want them to write 100 words for their summary of the book. For my novice learners, I am totally okay if they copy directly out of the book. Like, here's the sentence that I think is most important from chapter 1. Here's the sentence I think is most important from chapter 2. Particularly because our CI mini novels do so much repetition, often there is a sentence that will sum up kind of what they need to know. And my goal here is, if your goal is to see how much they can write, then don't have them do that. But if your instructional goal is to see how much did they understand and what are they able to synthesize, and can they identify the most important components of each chapter, the most important events, then I think it's kind of okay if your novices just pick a sentence directly out of the text and write it down. Whichever way you go, you end up with a 100-word summary. So then you can go 2 ways from here. Option 1, you can say, oh, you wrote such a beautiful 100-word summary, but now I need it to be 50 words, or I need it to be between 45 and 55 words. And so what this does is forces them to really analyze again, what are the most important ideas? What can I leave out? Maybe I had some extra adjectives, some extra filler words. Like, how can I trim it down even further? That's option 1. Option 2 is you can give it to another group. Groups can swap papers and do it, which sometimes is easier, because I think it's difficult when we try to edit our own work. Like, it's, we like what we produced, and so it's harder for us to oh, but that phrase is so valuable, I can't get rid of that one. So sometimes it's easier to excise somebody else's phrases than your own. So that's option 2. But somebody's trimming down that summary. I cannot remember the first place I learned about shrinking summaries. I think it was like an English language arts teacher many, many years ago. So forgive me for that. Certainly not my original idea. And then you can do a 3rd round. And you can do as many rounds as you want, but the goal is to really have them think about, how do I distill everything I read into the most important information? And that's a skill that we know we see, not that School is all about, big high stakes testing. However, it is a skill that we see all the time on big high stakes testing. What is the main idea? What would be a good title for this passage? So it's practicing skills that we know that they're going to need in like their cross-disciplinary adventures. Okay, I have some time for questions because that went way faster than I thought it would. What questions do people have?
Why does the
Oh.
zombies?
Well, hold on a second, Emmy. Hey, Andrea. So my 5-year-old's here, and she is obsessed with zombies.
Oh, amazing.
So she's been
Hi.
watching this entire presentation, and this was a whole lot easier 5 years ago when I would pick her up and have her.
Zombies from maple syrup.
Oh, what happens with the zombies in the maple syrup?
Why did the zombies fall in the maple syrup is the question she's decided to ask you.
Okay, I'm going to answer it, but anybody in the audience who doesn't want a spoiler, you should turn your volume down so you don't hear what I'm about to say. Or mute me, or what, you know what I mean. Okay, so the answer is, normally with zombies, to get rid of them, you have to get rid of their brains, right? But our brains don't work so well if they can't, if we can't breathe. And so it's not great, but they end up drowning in the maple syrup.
You have to get rid of the brains.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that gets rid of their brains.
yeah, the maple syrup gets rid of their brains, but not your brain. Because you
Yeah,
love
not yours. It's for you, it's a delicious treat on your pancakes. But they like go swimming in it and then they can't breathe.
it is good on pancakes.
I'm not in the pain.
Yeah, thanks for your question.
All right, we'll let other people answer questions now. Can you say thank you?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you want to place me now?
Any other questions?
There was one in the chat a little bit ago. What do you do with the artifacts after the year is over? Because you have new artifacts each year, and that's from Nicole.
Yeah, that is a great question. So I saved the like really, really, really spectacular ones. And like to use as models, because sometimes the kids are like, what do you mean I got to make an artifact? So the ones from the year before, those are special. They just go in the box. They're in the time capsule. But the ones from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I save and I use as examples because sometimes kids just need some ideas. And then eventually, they make their, before I get rid of them, I did this with my own children's artwork too. I take a picture. It's in my Google Drive somewhere in case I ever need it, but eventually I do get rid of the artifacts. Can't keep everything. They don't give me enough cupboards at school for that. So, any other questions? No.
All right, we had one more question come up here.
Yeah.
No, let me one.
Oh yeah, I have to bring I've got the print file for the book up. She's been looking at the pictures, so I have to have the picture for her to
Yeah.
ask the question.
Oh, okay. Should I stop sharing my screen?
No, you're okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the picture you wanted. What was your question?
Why did the zombies become a zombie?
Why did the
Oh,
zombies become a zombie?
you know what? They never actually find out in the story. Isn't that crazy?
What do
They're
you-
just so worried about escaping and getting rid of them that we never learned what happened. But in the beginning, it's teachers. The teachers are the zombies. I know, that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be really nervous if my biology teacher became a zombie, but I'm graduated, so I'm safe.
Oh yeah, you see your video now, don't you? All right, there were a couple of questions in the chat. What percentage of each class period
Can you place me now?
do you spend reading with your students?
Oh, that's a great question. So I probably, I would say I would split my class normally in half. I've taught at a lot of different schools with a lot of different time frames, but I would say I like to spend about 30 minutes of a class doing some novel work. And then I like to shake it up and do some other things. But about 30 minutes is my sweet spot for one day of class. I don't like to go beyond that. I also think it's super important with your students to give some choice as to how they want to read each chapter. So before I start a novel study with my kids, I'm always asking them, well, I give them a survey and I ask them, I ask them first of all, like, how do you like to, do you prefer to read like as a whole big group? Do you want to be in a small group with somebody that I choose, or do you want to read individually? And then they get some choice. And then sometimes we have to change their choices if they're not handling their choices super well. But I do think it's important. Some kids, like, it is torture. They just want to read ahead. They're quick readers. They just want to read the chapter. Other kids really need that extra support from reading with me. And some kids are like, I could talk it over with a friend and that would be good. So I do like to give kids choice. And then, so we read the chapter and then we are going to do whatever our activity for the day is. And that's about 30 minutes. Any others?
I do see a question in the chat. What age do you teach with these strategies from Whitney?
Yeah, so I have used these strategies with grades 6 through 12. I feel like I could go to 5th grade and be okay. I have not piloted them in an elementary school, but I have tried them in grades 6 through 12 in French and Spanish. And I don't teach, I don't speak any logographic languages, so some of these strategies may work less well in a language with a different alphabet. That's my disclaimer.
And one more, are the students writing with any help, like a vocabulary list or notes that they've taken in class from Vanessa?
Okay, so I really like the text to be the scaffold for, like, I don't necessarily need them to take notes per se, although with some novels, I do give kids a note catcher that has the character names on one side and then like physical characteristics, personality traits, wants or desires, and problems. And then they just, as we read, they might track those things just to kind of, especially if there's a novel with a lot of characters, it can help, track relationships between characters, that kind of thing. But when they actually write, mostly I want them to go back to the text. If they're doing, in my classroom, I always have I have the high frequency, like the Super 7 and Sweet 16 verbs up in my classroom. I've got a lot of anchor charts on the walls for transition words, colors, question words, things like that. So I want them to use the resources that are in our classroom and in the text itself. But anything, if it's open-ended, that's kind of all they have. If it's tighter, I'm going to give them sentence frames to work with.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think that is all the time we have for questions. So I'm just going to put your email in the chat again one more time in case anyone else has some lingering thoughts. But thank you very much, Andrea, for that wonderful presentation.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us tonight. This was great.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. And someone mentioned in the chat, maybe like propose the idea of your book coming out in Spanish. So maybe we need to talk.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea because kids love zombie books, as we just saw with Chris's daughter.
Yeah, it's